You ever feel like you're being watched? Well, you probably are, because there are insects absolutely everywhere. In your flowers, in your trees, and yes, even inside your walls. And some of them look horrible. Today, we're gonna be looking at every insect in your backyard, and our journey into this very weird world starts right in your home. You've probably seen this familiar face before. One of the most prolific insects in the world, the cockroach has made itself very comfortable alongside humans. They're so successful because they basically eat anything. Your food scraps, discarded cardboard, even carcasses of other bugs that have found their way into your house. And many species can be a big problem because they multiply quickly and spread disease in populated areas. They typically lurk in the shadows, scattering when the lights go on. You might hear the light scraping of their feet from inside a cabinet, or worse, inside your walls. And cockroaches aren't the only members of their order that are household pests either. I bet you didn't know that termites are technically just smaller social cockroaches. They're even more successful because these things are able to eat wood. And that's a problem, because a lot of houses are made of wood. But the cockroaches and termites aren't all pests. Most of the over 7,000 species in Bladodea are completely harmless, and use their very non-picky tastes for good, helping to break down organic matter in the environment. They're nature's most successful recyclers. They just get a bad name because a few species decided to be gross. But roaches aren't the only insects hiding in the shadows of your house. I bet you've seen something like this hiding in your attic at some point. The silverfish are from the order Zygentoma and are one of the most primitive insects in the world. They pretty much just eat paper and cardboard, so they turn up when you have boxes of old books in your attic. And they're usually sharing their papery meals with these guys, the book lice. In nature, they graze over bark in these neat little herds, and their name, lice, isn't an accident. The lice that suck blood on your head, yeah, they're in the same group as these attic dwellers. Weird how one of them evolved to eat tree products and the other became a gross parasite, but here we are. And speaking of parasites, your favorite pet is probably no stranger to household insects. Fleas, which you might just think are athletic lice, actually belong to their very own insect order, the Siphonaptera. And it's right there in the name. Fleas siphon blood from warm-blooded creatures, making your cat or dog a prime target. Fleas literally suck so bad, their entire insect order was named for it. One insect that gets blamed for being a parasite but actually isn't is this guy. The earwigs from the order Dermaptera wind up in your house quite a bit too. It's said they got their name because they climb in your ear while you're sleeping and lay eggs in your brain. Not only does your ear canal not lead directly to your brain, making this impossible, but the earwig prefers to stay out of sight, scavenging off of detritus and other dead material. They're kind of like a more sanitary version of the cockroach that doesn't become a major pest. They do have these terrifying claws on their abdomen, but they're not really that effective for pinching and really aren't a threat to anyone. Some predatory species use them to hold on to prey, but most are just using them to spar during mating. But perhaps the insect we all know and hate the most in our houses is this guy, the fly. But did you know that flies are so much more than the pests we find in our houses? This is a fly. This is also a fly. And even this is a fly. The true flies are from the order Diptera, meaning two wings. Of the winged insects, they're the only ones that only have two. If you look really closely, you can see these little club-like appendages they have instead of a second pair of wings. These are called halteres, and are actually one of the reasons the flies are so good at flying. They're like little gyroscopes, giving flies real-time feedback on their flight, and also allowing them to make crazy directional changes in midair. This makes flies notoriously difficult to catch for other aerial predators. Flies also play just about every role you could think of in the ecosystem. With over 150,000 known species, and probably millions more we haven't described, these might be the most diverse group of animals, not just insects, on the planet. The housefly you see in your kitchen is a scavenger like the cockroach. It loves stinky stuff because its diet consists of a lot of decaying material. They vomit a digestive saliva onto the surface of their food and then lick it up with their sponge-like mouth parts. And if that's not disgusting enough, they spread even more diseases than roaches do. Yeah, that isn't a myth. But don't hate all flies just because their most famous members are pests. Robber flies like these are actually helpful, eating mosquitoes and yellow jackets and many garden pests. They're also some of the most effective aerial hunters in the world, making them a top-tier insect if you ask me. If these guys were bigger, they'd probably be a real force to reckon with. Many flies are also major pollinators too, and a lot of the world's plant diversity depends on them. Houseflies are gross, sure. But as we head out the door and start looking at the garden variety insects, we're gonna see just how insane the world of bugs really is. People keep flower gardens because of all the vibrant colors and shapes, almost like 3D art you can enjoy during the warm parts of the year. But the spectrum of color in your garden doesn't just come from the plants, but also the butterflies that come to visit. I think people sometimes forget that butterflies are insects. We want insects to be gross, slimy things that creep in the muck. But these graceful, elegant creatures are actually one of my favorite groups of insects. The order that butterflies and moths come from is called Lepidoptera. It means scale wing. And you know how you heard of that powder that gives butterflies their color? Well, that powder is actually microscopic scales that cover their wings. Lepidopterans use these colors for all sorts of things. For some, it's camouflage. Some of the world's largest moths have massive wingspans and need to hide from predators during the day, so they opt for cryptic coloration that blends into the trees and leaf litter. Others are a form of warning colors, like the incredibly poisonous monarch butterfly, telling would-be predators to back off. And others still are almost transparent. But it's not just the adults that are cool. As larvae, the Lepidoptera live an entirely different lifestyle, gorging themselves on plants to save up energy for an entirely airborne adulthood. And being slow-moving, plant-eating insects means you're on the menu for a lot of other things, so you have to have some cunning defenses. Caterpillars have incredible disguises, looking like lichen or sticks, but also insane chemical defenses. Some of the most dangerously venomous insects in the world are caterpillars. Many species line themselves with stinging hairs and can absolutely land you in the hospital if you don't keep your distance. We don't often think of caterpillars as an insect we need to keep our distance from, but we do think of these guys. Bees and wasps group together with ants to form the Hymenoptera, the membrane-winged insects, many of which are common garden visitors. Bees are among the most important pollinators in the world, visiting flowers to bring nectar back to their hive. These insects are surprisingly complex. They have a system of dances, vibrations, and chemical signals they use to communicate everything from their mood to where good flowers are to even sound the alarm to swarm. Many of the Hymenoptera have opted for what we call a eusocial lifestyle. This is where instead of one individual organism fending for itself, the species relies on strength in numbers, with entire colonies functioning as one superorganism. Bees do this pretty well, but nothing does it better than the ants. One of, if not the most successful insects in the world, ants can live in colonies with hundreds of thousands, even millions of individuals, and they basically build clone armies. Workers are all twin sisters, serving a massive queen by gathering food and defending the nest. And ants have some cunning defenses. Many species have large major workers armed with giant slicing jaws, and many ants have potent venoms that rival some of the world's most venomous snakes. Most of the world's most venomous insects by weight are ants. But not all Hymenoptera are this complicated. The wasps can live in groups as well, or have solitary lifestyles. These are some of the most feared insects, not because they're particularly dangerous to your life, but because they can be very defensive and have intensely painful stings. Most of the world's most painful stinging insects are wasps. Funny enough, some of the most painful stings come from solitary wasps. Things like the velvet ant, which is actually a solitary parasitic wasp, patrol the ground looking for nests of insect eggs, and have a much less toxic venom by weight, but it's evolved entirely to induce pain. Tarantula hawks have a 1-2 punch. Their neurotoxic venom stuns giant spiders, which they feed to their larvae, but it also lights the nervous system of larger animals on fire. This group also gets even weirder the deeper down the rabbit hole you go. This is a wasp. This is also a wasp. These aren't wasps, but they're in a related group called sawflies. It's easy to focus just on the stinging ones, but this group is actually pretty insane, although it doesn't have anything on the next order. The beetles are currently the most diverse group of insects known to modern science. They're also sort of the most standard insect that I think most people think of. With over 400,000 described species, beetles represent over 40% of all known arthropods and 25% of all known animals. Yes, we often forget that insects are animals too, and if you put every described animal species name in a hat and drew one out at random, you would have a 1 in 4 chance that it's a beetle. Beetles are known for having an extremely tough exoskeleton, but they also have a lot of other really insane abilities too. Some beetles are among the most poisonous insects on Earth. Others look like eldritch horrors out of something like Dark Souls. And then you have things like the stag beetle, which is arguably one of the most famous insects in the world. They have lifestyles ranging from fierce predator to poop-eating scavenger, and everything in between. Aquatic beetles, glow-in-the-dark beetles, and super camouflaged beetles that disguise themselves as rocks. The closer you look at the world around you, odds are you'll see tons of beetles living all around you all the time. And you can literally go outside every day and see a new type of beetle you've never seen before. That's how many beetles there are, and it's one of the best parts about them. Then, of course, you have these guys. You've probably seen them flitting around your porch lights at night. The lacewings belong to the order Neuroptera, which means netwing. Most of them are predators of small, soft-bodied insects, if they even eat at all as adults. But it's their larvae that you probably don't realize are around that are what make this group really interesting. This is what their larvae look like. Literally some sort of Star Trek horror. And they don't just look horrible, they're venomous too. Those long, terrifying mandibles inject their insect prey with paralyzing toxins before they literally drain out their life force. Neuroptera have 3 major groups: owlflies, lacewings, and antlions. The owlflies look the coolest. Huge, terrifying ambush predators that look like an alligator snapping turtle mixed with an alien. But the antlion probably has the coolest hunting strategy. Like the Sarlacc from Star Wars, they dig these cone-shaped pits that ants fall into. They sometimes even throw sand at ants to get them to fall in. These are crazy freaking things. This next group is another one of my absolute favorites, and you're about to see why. The true bugs belong to the order Hemiptera, and not only do they have a ton of species diversity, but they also come in every single shape and size you can possibly think of. The thing that all true bugs have in common is the way that they feed. They all have a proboscis and inject digestive enzymes into their food, slurping up the liquid through their straw-like mouths. Some use it as a weapon against other bugs. Assassin bugs, predatory stink bugs, and even some of the aquatic Hemiptera have basically evolved their own form of venom. Leafhoppers, cicadas, stink bugs, and many of the other odd cast of characters use it instead on plants. One of the groups of true bugs that are absolutely insane looking are the plant hoppers. They push mimicry to the next level, looking like pieces of the plants they live on. And then there are the assassin bugs, which look like sci-fi monsters with their bright colors and insane spiny thoraxes. One of the most classic groups of insects, and about as garden variety as they come, are the insects in the order Orthoptera, which you probably know as the grasshoppers and crickets. The grasshoppers and I go way back. These are the first insects I used to catch as a little kid, and are basically what started my fascination with nature in the first place. Most of them are pretty basic, with a brown or green body and those long jumping hind legs. But the Orthoptera have a surprising amount of really weird members too. Once we look past the generic crickets and grasshoppers, you get things like the band-winged grasshoppers. Hoppers that are super camouflaged on the ground, but then have flashy, bright-colored wings like a butterfly when they take off. Or the leopard grasshoppers, which are not only massive, but poisonous. On the longhorn side of the spectrum, you have some of the most insane camouflage in the insect world. Katydids that mimic leaves down to the veins, and even bites from other insects. The Orthoptera weirdness doesn't stop there either. One of the lesser-known families is the Tridactylidae, known as pygmy mole crickets. They live almost entirely underground in the top layer of sandy habitats, eating microscopic algae that grows on the grains of sand. These guys get so weird. And as we head deeper into the weeds beyond our manicured gardens, the insects get even weirder and even more terrifying. If you're an insect, I don't think it gets any more terrifying than the praying mantis. From the order Mantodea, these are one of the most iconic insects in the world, and they don't play around. Most of them are extremely camouflaged, using their green or brown color and stick-like appearance to blend into the vegetation, where they sit very still and wait for food. Unlike other insect predators that typically use venom to paralyze their prey before they start eating, the mantises just go for it, grabbing on with strong raptorial claws and ripping their catches apart while they're still alive. Yeah, not pretty. Mantises are pretty tough to find, not just because of their camouflage, but because they tend to disperse pretty far and are fairly territorial. But there are some that get really weird, too. They're not just the stick-like giants you typically think of, there are tiny ones that look like grass, flat ones that look like bark, and even strange flying ones that look kind of like cockroaches. In some parts of the world, they can even mimic flowers or large leaves. These ambush hunters are the terrors waiting around every corner for other insects. But the world of bugs gets even scarier than this. As if you didn't have enough to fear in the bushes and trees, the skies are filled with insane predatory power. The dragonflies of the order Odonata are not just precise with their kills, they are the most effective predator on Earth, with a hunting success rate of over 96%. So if a dragonfly has you in its sights, it's probably game over. But the dragonfly's story is even more interesting than that. It starts in the water, where they look even crazier as nymphs. Covering themselves in algae for camouflage, they hunt on the bed of streams and ponds, using a harpoon-like mouth to grab other insects, and sometimes even tadpoles. Other insects call the stream home too, things like the mayflies, caddisflies, and stoneflies. This can actually be used to determine how healthy a stream is. Many of the nymphs of these streamside insects need low pollution and high oxygen levels to survive. If they're around, it usually means the stream is healthy and can support a lot of other life. Almost like a canary in a mine, if these guys disappear, a lot of the other stream life is soon to follow. One of these sensitive stream insects is also among the most terrifying. The Helgramites are an eldritch horror you'd think would be saved for fantasy video games, but no, they're potentially in your local creek. Living under rocks and in the substrate, these monstrous things are hunting other insects, which they tear apart with those razor-sharp jaws. Now you're probably wondering, surely if it looks this ugly as a baby, it grows up to be something really stunning, right? Well, stunning is a word for it. They become a massive flying insect that terrorizes people at their porch lights on warm nights during the summer. The Dobson fly. These guys are awesome. They have huge, leathery wings, crazy-looking eyes, and massive jaws. The ones with really huge antlers are the males, and like stag beetles, these are actually used for sparring other males, not biting you. The females can bite though, so wash your fingers with them. The craziest part of these insects' life story is the fact that they only live in this insane-looking form for a couple of days up to a week. They emerge from the water, mate, lay eggs in the water, and die. And the cycle continues as new Helgramites hatch out to terrorize the creek once more. But not all of the insects out here in the weeds need to be scary. Some of them, the ones that are more secretive, the ones that make a living by not being seen, are actually really cool. Some of my absolute favorites are the walking sticks. They sport the best mimicry of all insects. The plant hoppers get close second, but these guys look like plants in a way nothing else does. These insects have evolved long, slender body plans, oftentimes even bumps, spines, and discoloration of twigs and sticks. They use this alongside slow, sweeping movements to hide in plain sight, where they wait out the daylight to eat leaves under cover of night. A couple of them are poisonous, but aside from being voracious herbivores that can eat a lot of vegetation, they really aren't very problematic. They just look insanely cool. And if we look closer to the ground, there's a whole other secret world thriving. In the leaf litter and underneath rocks and logs, strange, primitive things mill about. The thrips are tiny, thin insects that eat everything from fungus to other insects. Bristletails feed on the algae and fungal mats that grow in the soil, and these termite-like zoopterans mill about in their forgotten corners of the habitat. If you're really lucky, you might see little tubes of web stretched throughout the substrate. You think it's a spider, right? Nope. This is one of the weirdest insects on Earth. Their name really isn't all that creative. We call them the web spinners. They live together in these little groups called galleries, where they eat decaying plant matter and dead insects and stuff. They're actually related to the walking sticks, and you can kind of see it in their body plan. The females have these bulbous front legs, almost like Popeye's arms, and this is where their silk glands are. Males pretty much only turn up during mating season, and might show up at your porch light. But to see these strange galleries of web, you really have to get out in the weeds. Depending on where you are in the world, there are other bizarre groups hiding out there too. In parts of Africa, there are insects called mantophasmids, because they look like a cross between a praying mantis and a walking stick, that eat other insects. Or the grilloblattids of colder regions, which we call ice crawlers, that look almost like you mixed a cockroach and a cricket. But perhaps one of the weirdest of these obscure insects are the Strepsiptera, the twisted-winged insects. I've never gotten a chance to see one for myself, but odds are they're closer to you than you'd think. They're parasites of wasps, and the females live in the larval stage their entire life, looking like this odd, flat creature that's wedged between the segments of a wasp's abdomen. They literally have one of the strangest lives of any creature on the planet. Some insects look like you Frankensteined parts of other insects and put them together and called it a day. The snakeflies of the Raphidioptera take elements of beetles, lacewings, and plant hoppers and stick them together into one insect. The scorpion flies are even weirder. What would you guess this is related to? A plant hopper? A wasp? Nope. Fleas. Their closest relative is fleas. How? Don't ask me. But these things look bizarre. And I'll do you one better. You almost always find them around dead and decaying animals. Certain species are actually used in figuring out how long a corpse has been dead in murder investigations, because the scorpion flies are sometimes the first insects to arrive. Isn't the insect world just marvelous? Over 28 orders of insects, and they just get increasingly weirder. I guarantee more of these are lurking closer to you than you'd think at this very moment as you watch this video. But despite how weird and terrifying some of them are, the neat part is that we basically couldn't exist without them. Even the weirdest, most horrible looking insects on this list serve roles for the ecosystem that all life on this planet needs to survive. The insects help keep a delicate balance that makes our natural world as special as it is. And it's not just insects that are all over the place. There are a ton of spiders in your backyard too. If you think you're brave enough to discover what 8-legged creatures are lurking in your backyard, check out this video right here. Hope to see you there, but until next time, don't forget to get outside and find your own adventure.